The lemon soap always stings the small crack on my right thumb, but I keep my hands submerged in the hot water, because the heat is the only thing that dulls the deep ache in my knuckles. Through the Smalls window above the sink, the dusk is settling over the backyard. The hydrangeas I planted the spring after my husband, Arthur, passed away are turning a dry, papery blue. They need to be pruned before the first frost. But my knees have been troublesome this week, and the garden has grown slightly wild. From the dining room, just past the swinging wooden door with the brass push plate, I hear the distinct clink of a glass meeting the mahogany table. It is the Arthur and I bought with our first tax refund 42 years ago. It has 6 leaves, though we only use 2 now. If we list it in October, we bypass the winter slump. Julian's voice carries easily over the drone of the refrigerator. The market in this zip code is still holding, but by spring, things will tighten up. We need to move while the equity is sitting there. I lift a white porcelain dinner plate, the ones with the delicate blue willow pattern, and begin to run the yellow sponge along its rim. It is quiet work. I have always been quiet in this kitchen. For 40 years, my family has associated the sound of running water with my absence. To them, when the faucet is on, I am paused. I am a domestic white noise machine, occupying a corner of the house, keeping things clean while the real lives are lived in the next room. "What about the garden?" Leo asks. His voice is younger, softer, but it carries that familiar thin thread of anxiety that has followed him since childhood. She spends all afternoon out there. If we move her to the townhouse near the highway, there's only a concrete patio. A short, sharp burst of laughter follows. It is Julian's laugh, the dry, efficient sound he uses when he is closing a deal or dismissing an impractical suggestion. She's 68, Leo. She shouldn't be bending over weeding anyway. It's a liability. One fall out there when we aren't checking on her, and we're looking at assisted living costs that will eat up the entire inheritance in 2 years. This way, we liquidate the house, put her in the 2-bedroom condo, and we use the surplus to clear my bridge loan. You can finally settle that tax lien. I hold the blue willow plate under the stream of hot water. The steam rises, clouding my glasses, blurring the neat rows of spices on the rack Arthur built for me. But the transition, Leo mutters, though his protest is weak, already folding under the weight of his brother's certainty. She's lived here since we were in diapers. Every holiday. The grandkids will adapt. Julian cuts in, his voice dropping into that low, authoritative register he uses when he wants to end a debate. And so will she. Mothers are resilient. She'll be relieved not to have the stairs to climb. We just have to present it as a done deal. If we give her options, she'll hesitate. We need her to sign the power of attorney update before the winter utility bills hit. Once that's done, I'll handle the listing. She doesn't even have to look at the paperwork. We'll tell her it's a routine update for the estate index. And if she asks about the furniture, we sell what we can, donate the rest. Most of it is outdated anyway. Who wants a solid oak dining set these days? Young buyers want minimalism. I turn the faucet off. The sudden silence in the kitchen is heavy, almost physical. The only sound left is the slow, rhythmic drip-drip of the brass spout, which has leaked since the winter of '96. Arthur always meant to change the washer, but we got used to the cadence of it. It became part of the house's heartbeat. In the dining room, the voices stop instantly. They are listening. They are waiting to see if the silence means I am coming through the door. I do not move. I stand by the sink, my hands dripping soapy water onto the linoleum floor. I look down at the blue willow plate in my hands. It is perfectly clean. But I turn the faucet back on, letting the warm water rush over my skin once more, giving them back their curtain of noise. See? Julian's voice returns, quieter now, a conspiratorial murmur. She's completely oblivious. She's in her own world. It's actually kinder this way, Leo. We do the heavy lifting, and she gets a nice, low-maintenance place where she doesn't have to worry about a roof leaking. Children rarely notice a mother disappearing until the things she does for them stop happening. They think our service is a natural law, like gravity or the sunrise. They do not realize that every meal cooked, every shirt ironed, and every secret kept is a choice, and choices can be changed. I place the blue willow plate gently into the drying rack. I do not let it clatter. We'll do it next month, Julian says as his chair scraping back against the floorboards. The floorboards I polished on my knees 3 days ago. I'll bring the notary over on Tuesday under the guise of the annual tax review. She'll sign it without a second thought. I reach for the linen dish towel. It is embroidered with small lavender flowers, a gift from my sister before she passed. My hands are red and slightly swollen from the heat, but they are steady. I dry my hands, fold the towel neatly over the oven handle, and reach for the brass handle of the swinging door. The brass plate of the swinging door is cool under my palm as I push it open. The dining room is warm, smelling of the pot roast we finished an hour ago, and the faint, bitter scent of Julian's expensive cologne. Both of my sons look up as I enter. The transition in their expressions is seamless, a practiced, instinctual mask that children wear when they believe they are protecting an aging parent from the harshness of the world, or perhaps just from themselves. Julian immediately slides his leather portfolio over a yellow legal pad, his movements smooth and unhurried. He smiles. It is his client smile, the one where his eyes remain perfectly still while his mouth does the work. "All done in there, Mom?" he asks, his voice shifting into a higher, gentler octave. It is the tone people use with toddlers or the very frail. "Almost," I say. I keep my voice level, slightly soft just as they expect. The heavy pots are soaking. I'll let them sit overnight. Leo stands up quickly, his chair scraping loud against the oak floor. "You should have left the plates for me, Mom. I told you I'd help." "You did, Leo," I say, offering him a small, reassuring nod. "But you were busy talking. I didn't want to interrupt." He flushes, a brief patch of red appearing on his throat. He reaches for his water glass, taking a long sip to avoid my gaze. Leo has always been a poor liar. When he was 7, he threw a baseball through the garage window and spent 3 days refusing to look me in the eye until I finally sat him down and wiped the glass dust from his sneakers. He hasn't changed. He still carries his guilt like a physical weight, hunched in his shoulders. Yet he never has quite enough courage to stop Julian from carrying out the plans he designs. "We were just talking about the house maintenance," Julian says, leaning back in his chair and crossing one leg over the other. His leather loafer swings slightly. With winter coming, the gutters are going to need clearing. And that furnace in the basement is getting older. I was telling Leo we should get some of the administrative stuff sorted out so you don't have to worry about these things. That's very thoughtful of you, Julian, I say. I walk to the sideboard and begin gathering the remaining dessert plates. They are dusty around the edges. We don't use this room often enough to keep the dust away. Actually, Julian continues, his tone casual, almost conversational, I have Mr. Vance coming over on Tuesday afternoon. You remember Arthur's old colleague? He's a notary now. He has to help us update the estate index. Just some routine paperwork to ensure the property tax exemptions stay locked in at your senior rate. It'll save you a few $1,000s a year. I keep my back to him as I stack the plates. Tuesday, I repeat softly. Just a quick signature, Julian says. I'll bring some lunch over. We can sit down, get it done in 10 minutes, and then you don't have to think about taxes or city assessments for another decade. Doesn't that sound like a relief? Some people confuse unconditional love with permanent access. They believe that because a mother has forgiven their childhood selfishness, their teenage rebellions, and their adult neglect, she has also surrendered her capacity to perceive them clearly. Julian thinks I see him as his father saw him, the golden boy, the high achiever, the son that went to the state university and bought a house with a 3-car garage. He does not know that I have seen the late payment notices he accidentally left on my kitchen counter last Thanksgiving. I have seen the dry, desperate look in his wife's eyes when she thinks no one is watching her. I know about the bridge loan he took out to keep his small brokerage firm afloat, and I know it wasn't a bridge at all. It was a plank. A relief, I say, turning around to face them. I hold the snack dessert plates against my apron. Yes, Julian, taxes are always such a muddle. Exactly, Julian says, his shoulders visibly relaxing. He looks at Leo, a quick, triumphant glance that says, see, I told you it would be easy. So Tuesday at noon, I'll handle everything. That will be fine, I say. I look at Leo. He is staring down at his hands, his thumbs tracing the seam of jeans. Is your car still making that noise, Leo? I ask. He looks up, startled. What? Oh, no, I had the alternator replaced last month. Good, I say, my voice gentle. I worry about you driving that highway late at night. The winters here are very dark. I'm fine, Mom, he says, but his voice is thick. They think I am a simple woman because I stayed in this house while their father went out into the world. They think that because my life was bounded by the grocery store, the garden, and the church bazaar, my mind must be similarly small. They do not realize that when you spend 40 years managing the silences of a household, you learn to read the gaps between words better than the words themselves. They do not know that Arthur did not leave this house to me in a simple deed 2 years before he died. When the cancer began to show in the gray hollows of his cheeks, Arthur sat with me at this very table. He had a flask of whiskey and a yellow envelope. He told me that Julian was ambitious, but that ambition without patience is a dangerous thing. He'll try to climb too fast, Clara, Arthur had whispered, his hand dry in paper, then over mine. And if he falls, he'll grab onto whatever is closest to keep himself up. Don't let him pull you down to save himself. The house stays in the private trust. Only the trustee can dissolve it. The boys believe Julian is the executor of the estate because he handled the funeral arrangements and the small life insurance policy. They never asked about the trust. They assumed the house was simply in my name, a piece of fruit waiting to be plucked when I grew too tired to hold on to the branch. I should get going, Julian says, checking his watch, the gold one Arthur gave him for graduation, the one Julian had polished twice last year. The traffic on the bridge gets heavy after 8. Leo, you coming? Yeah, Leo says, standing up quickly, almost eagerly. I'll follow you out. They walk toward the hallway, their heavy footsteps echoing on the hardwood. I stand in the dining room, the 3 dessert plates heavy in my arms. Good night, Mom, Julian calls out from the front door. Don't worry about those pots. Just leave them. Good night, boys, I say to the empty room. The front door clicks shut. The latch is loose. It always requires a firm pull to seat properly in the frame, but they never remember to pull it hard enough. I hear the wind catch the wood, a low, hollow rattle as the draft enters the hallway. I place the plates on the table. I do not go to the kitchen to finish the pots. Instead, I walk down the narrow hallway to the small library at the back of the house. The air in here is colder, smelling of old paper and the cedar chest in the corner. I do not need to turn on the light. I know every inch of this room in the dark. I reach behind the 3rd shelf of Arthur's old encyclopedias, my fingers searching for the small, cold shape of the brass key, hidden behind the volume marked MN. The brass key is small, no longer than my pinky finger, but it has a heavy, old-fashioned weight. It feels cold against my palm as I carry it to the cedar chest. I kneel on the small braided rug. My knees protest, a sharp, familiar pinch, but I ignore it. I lift the heavy cedar lid. The scent of dried lavender and mothballs rises to meet me. The smell of things kept, things preserved, things hidden away from the sun. At the bottom of the chest, beneath 3 hand-quilted blankets I made for the boys when they went off to college, lies a small green tin box. It once held English biscuits, a gift from Arthur on our 5th anniversary. Now it holds the reality of our lives. I fit the key into the lock. It turns with a dry metallic click. Inside are the documents Arthur and I prepared when we knew his time was short. I pull out the thick blue folder labeled the Bennett Family Trust. Julian believes he understands the law because he spends his days drafting commercial contracts. He thinks in straight lines, assets, liabilities, transfers. But Arthur and I did not think in straight lines. We thought in safeguards. I open the folder, my eyes scanning the familiar legal phrasing. The house, the land it sits on, and the small savings account Arthur left behind are all held within the trust. I am the sole trustee. Upon my death, the trust is meant to dissolve, and the assets are to be divided equally between Julian and Leo. But there is a specific clause on page 12. Arthur insisted on it. In the event that the trustee is deemed incapacitated, or if a transfer of trust property is attempted under a power of attorney without the unanimous written and notarized consent of all named beneficiaries, and an independent third-party evaluation, the trust shall immediately terminate, and all remaining assets shall be transferred to the Bennett Foundation for Pediatric Oncology. Arthur had seen how his own sisters tore their family apart over a 3-acre farm in Ohio after their mother died. He knew that greed is not a sudden sickness. It is a slow, quiet rot that starts in the corners of a family and waits for a moment of weakness to show itself. But as I look deeper into the tin box, my hand brushes against a smaller, white envelope. It is a letter that arrived 3 weeks ago. It was addressed to Arthur, even though he has been gone for 10 years. Most people throw away mail addressed to the dead, but I have always opened them. Sometimes the world forgets to update its ledgers, and those mistakes can be telling. The letter is from a private lending firm called Oakridge Capital. It is a notice of a second mortgage inquiry on this property. I pull the paper out and look at the signature at the bottom of the application page. Clara Bennett. The handwriting is beautiful. It looks almost exactly like my own. The round, sloping C, the elegant cross on the T. But I did not sign this. I look closer, squinting through my bifocals. The C in Clara has a tiny, sharp hook at the top. I have arthritis. My hand shakes slightly when I write, making my curves soft, almost blunt. But Julian's handwriting has always been precise. When he was in high school, he used to practice my signature on his permission slips. He thought I didn't know. He thought he was being clever, sparing me the trouble of signing his report cards. He didn't realize that a mother knows her own name. She knows the weight of her own letters. Julian did not just ask me to sign a power of attorney to help with the winter utility bills. He has already used my name to secure a loan. He has already committed fraud. The application is marked pending title verification. The lender's title search must have flagged the trust. They realize that Clara Bennett, as an individual, does not own this house. The Bennett Family Trust owns it. To clear the loan, Julian's needs me to sign a document that either names him as a co-trustee or transfers the property out of the trust and into my personal name, where his forged power of attorney can finally take hold. That is what Mr. Vance is bringing on Tuesday. It is not a routine tax exemption update. It is the final piece of a trap Julian has set for himself. The most dangerous lie is not the one told to others, but the one a desperate man tells himself to justify his survival. Julian has likely convinced himself that he is just borrowing the equity. He tells himself he will pay it back before I ever find out. He tells himself he is doing what is best for the family. But if I sign that paper on Tuesday, I validate his forgery. I hand him the keys to the foundation of my life, and within 6 months, this house will belong to Oakridge Capital. If I do not sign, the lending firm will deny the loan. They will investigate the pending application. They will look at the signature. They will contact the police. And Julian will go to prison. The house is completely silent now, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Tick, tick, tick. Each second is a choice. I sit on the floor, the paper cold in my hand. I have 3 days. 3 days to decide whether to save my son by destroying myself, or to let him fall into the hole he has dug with his own hands. I look at the quilted blankets in the chest. I remember Julian's first day of school, how he held my hand so tight his knuckles turned white. He was afraid of the big bus. I told him then, "I'm right here, Julian. I won't let anything happen to you." I fold the letter and place it back inside the biscuit tin. I lock it, slide the key back behind the encyclopedia, and walk out of the library. In the kitchen, the pots are still soaking in the dark water. I do not wash them. I walk to the wall phone by the pantry, lift the receiver, and dial a number I haven't called in 5 years. The line rings 3 times before a woman's voice answers, sounding tired, quiet, and deeply surprised. "Clara," Sarah says. "Is that you, Clara?" Sarah's voice is small, filtered through the static of the old kitchen telephone. "Is everything all right?" Just 9. "I'm sorry to call so late, Sarah," I say, leaning my head against the cool drywall. "I know Lily has school tomorrow." No, it's fine." Lily's already asleep. There is a brief pause, the sound of a television being muted in the background. Sarah's voice drops, losing its defensive edge and turning soft. "It's been a long time, Clara." 5 years, I say. When Julian divorced Sarah, he demanded the family choose. He told me that Sarah was unstable, that she was trying to take him for everything he had. He wanted me to cut her off completely. But I had watched Sarah for 12 years. I had seen her wash his shirts, defend his long absences to their daughter, and quietly her own savings into his account when his first business venture failed. I knew who Sarah was, and I knew who my son was. Though Julian believed I had turned my back on her, I had kept a post office box in the next town. Every month I sent Sarah a small check for Lily's savings account, along with recipes and dried pressed flowers from my garden. We never spoke on the phone. It was too dangerous. Julian had a habit of checking my phone bills when he came to help me with my taxes. But tonight, the paper in the biscuit tin has changed the rules. "I need to ask you about Julian," I say quietly. A heavy silence stretches over the line. I can hear Sarah's slow, deliberate breathing. "If he knows we're talking," she begins. "He won't know," I assure her. "He was here tonight. He and Leo had dinner. Julian told me he's bringing a notary over on Tuesday, a Mr. Vance. He wants me to sign some papers to update my tax status." I hear a sharp, sudden intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Oh, God," Sarah whispers. "He's actually doing it. Tell me, Sarah." I need to know what he is facing. Wives and mothers see the same man from different sides of a two-way mirror. The mother remembers the boy who cried when he scraped his knee. The wife knows the man who learns to use his wounds as weapons. For years, Sarah had protected Julian's pride, hiding his failures from me, just as I had hidden his childhood thefts from his father. But the time for protection has passed. "Julian's firm is under a regulatory audit, Clara," Sarah says, her voice trembling slightly but growing firmer as she speaks. "It's not just a cash flow issue. He didn't just lose money. He used client investment funds to cover his personal trading debts. It's embezzlement. If he doesn't replace $350,000 by the end of the month, the state board is going to refer the case to the Attorney General." I close my eyes. The kitchen wall is cold against my temple. $350,000. "And Leo?" I ask. "What does Leo have to do with this?" "That's the worst part," Sarah says, and I can hear the anger finally breaking through her exhaustion. "Julian convinced Leo to co-sign an indemnity bond last year. Leo thinks he's just helping Julian secure a commercial lease. He doesn't understand that if Julian's firm collapses, the bond allows the creditors to go after Leo's assets too. Julian used Leo's clean credit rating as a shield. If Julian goes down, Leo goes down with him. He'll lose his townhome. He'll lose everything. Desperate men do not love their brothers. They use them as life jackets, forgetting that two people who cannot swim will only drown faster together. Julian has always known how to play on Leo's desire to be useful. He has spent 30 years making Leo feel small so that Leo would always look up to him for direction. He wants to sell the house, I say, though it is not a question. He's already listed it, Clara, Sarah says softly, on a private brokerage database. He listed it as a pre-market pocket listing 3 weeks ago. He's already accepted a backup offer from a developer who wants to tear it down and build 3 modern townhomes. The developer is just waiting for the title to be cleared. The hydrangeas, the yellow kitchen, the brass faucet that leaks, the height marks carved into the pantry doorframe, showing how my boys grew from toddlers into men. To the developer, it is just square footage. To Julian, it is a get-out-of-jail-free card. He needs my signature to clear the title, I say. Yes. Since the house is in the trust, he needs you to sign an amendment appointing him as co-trustee, or a deed transferring the property back to you personally, so he can use the power of attorney he's going to make you sign. Clara, you can't sign anything. If you sign, you are giving him permission to destroy you. And if I don't sign, I ask, what happens to Julian on Wednesday? Sarah is quiet for a long moment. When she speaks, her voice is flat, stripped of all emotion. If the funds aren't in the escrow account by Wednesday at 5 o'clock, the audit report goes to the prosecutor. He'll be indicted by Friday. I see, I say. Clara, what are you going to do? I look down at my hands. The swelling in my knuckles has gone down slightly, but the skin is dry, patterned with 1,000 tiny lines like a map of a country I've walked for 68 years. I'm going to make sure the kitchen is clean, I say. Clara, please. He's desperate. You don't know how he gets when he's cornered. He's not the boy you raised anymore. I know exactly who he is, Sarah, I say gently. Thank you for telling me the truth. Give Lily a kiss for me. I will. Clara, be careful. I hang up the receiver. The click of the phone hook is loud in the empty house. I walk back to the dining room. I pick up the 3 dessert plates I left on the table. I carry them to the kitchen, place them in the warm, soapy water, and begin to wash them. My movements are slow, deliberate, and entirely without anger. Anger is a loud, messy emotion. It wastes energy, and right now I need every bit of strength I have. As I rinse the last plate, I realize something. Julian has scheduled the notary for Tuesday at noon, but Sarah said he listed the house 3 weeks ago. If he listed the house 3 weeks ago, he must have already promised the developer a specific date for the physical inspection. I dry my hands on the lavender towel. I walk to the small desk in the living room where I keep my calendar. I flip the page to next week. On Wednesday, I have my weekly bridge club at the senior center from 1 to 4 in the afternoon. It is the only time during the week that I am guaranteed to be out of the house for more than an hour. Julian knows my schedule. He has always kept track of it under the guise of making sure I'm staying active. I look at the empty calendar square for Wednesday afternoon. He isn't just planning to sell the house. He is planning to have the liquidators come while I am sitting in a community room 3 miles away, playing cards with my friends. He wants me to return to a house that has already been tagged, measured, and hollowed out. Sunday morning is always the quietest part of the week. Usually I would be getting dressed for the 9 o'clock service at Grace Methodist, wearing my good gray wool coat and the small silver brooch Arthur gave me for our 25th anniversary. But today I stay in my housecoat. I sit at the kitchen table with a cup of black tea, watching the steam rise and disappear into the yellow light. At 10, I dial Leo's number. He answers on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep or perhaps something heavier. "Mom, is everything okay?" It's Sunday. "I'm fine, Leo," I say, keeping my voice gentle, the voice of a mother who simply wants to hear her son's voice. "But I have a small favor to ask." I was looking through the basement closet this morning, and there are 3 boxes of your father's old ledgers and tax records from the store. My knees are too stiff to carry them up the stairs, and I'd like to have them cleared out before Julian and the notary come on Tuesday. I hear a sharp rustle on the other end. The sound of him sitting up quickly in bed. "The basement, Mom. You shouldn't be going down there. The stairs are damp." "I know, dear. That's why I'm calling. If you aren't too busy, could you come by this afternoon and help me? I'll make those lemon squares you like." There is a long, hesitant pause. I can almost hear the gears turning in his head, the conflict between his guilt and his instinct to avoid this house and me until the deed is done on Tuesday. But Leo has never been able to say no to me when I ask for something directly. He has too much of his father's soft heart, even if he has let Julian run roughshod over it. "Yeah," he says, his voice dropping. "Yeah, I can come by. Around 1? 1 would be lovely." "Thank you, Leo." I hang up and begin to make the lemon squares. Cooking is a form of prayer for women of my generation. You measure the flour, you cold cut the butter, you squeeze the lemons until your fingers sting from the acid. You put your hands to work because your mind is carrying things too heavy for words. A younger brother's loyalty is often built in the dark of his older brother's shadow, mistaking the coldness of that eclipse for safety. Leo has spent his entire life running behind Julian, trying to catch the crumbs of approval Julian drops. When they were boys, Julian would convince Leo to climb the old oak tree in the park to reach the highest branches, promising to catch him if he fell. Leo always climbed, and when the branch snapped, Julian was always standing 10 feet away, watching with wide, analytical eyes while Leo lay on the grass with the breath knocked out of him. At precisely 1 o'clock, Leo's Sazazan pulls into the driveway. He looks tired when he walks through the back door. There are dark purplish smudges under his eyes, and his flannel shirt is wrinkled, as if he pulled it out of a hamper. He smells faintly of stale cigarette smoke, a habit he took up in college and only returns to when his anxiety becomes unmanageable. "Smells good in here," he says, attempting a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "The lemon squares are cooling on the rack," I say, wiping my hands on my apron. "They'll be ready by the time we're done. Let's get those boxes out of the basement first." I lead him down the wooden basement stairs. The air down here is cool and damp, smelling of stone dust and old coal. In the far corner next to the idle water heater sit 3 dusty cardboard boxes. They aren't actually Arthur's ledgers. They are filled with old Sears catalogs and outdated telephone directories I packed away years ago. But Leo doesn't know that. He bends down and lifts the first box. He is 36 years old. But as he stands there in the dim basement light, his shoulders hunched under the weight. He looks like the boy who used to hide in the pantry when his father's voice got too loud. "Mom," Leo says, keeping his back to me. "About Tuesday." "Yes, dear. Julian. He's really doing a lot of work for this. You know that, right? He's just trying to make sure you're taken care of. He doesn't want you to have to worry about the upkeep here." I stand at the foot of the stairs, my hand resting on the rough wooden banister. "Julian has always been very busy," I say softly. "He has a lot of responsibilities. He tells me his business is growing very fast." Leo's shoulders stiffen. He doesn't turn around. "Yeah, he's doing a lot, but it's stressful. The market is tough right now." "Is he helping you too, Leo, with your business?" Leo slowly sets the box down on the concrete floor. He stands there for a long moment, his hands buried deep in his pockets. When he finally turns to face me, his face is pale, almost translucent under the bare yellow bulb hanging from the ceiling rafters. "He's my brother, Mom," Leo says, his voice cracking slightly. "We have to look out for each other." "That's what Dad always said, right?" Family holds the line. "Your father did say that, I agree." My voice quiet, steady, and filled with a sadness that has no bottom. "But your father also said that a line is only as strong as the men standing in it. If one man drops his shield to protect his own skin, the man next to him takes the blow." Leo stares at me. His mouth opens slightly, but no sound comes out. He looks at the stairs, then back at me, his eye wide with a sudden dawning terror. He realizes in that small, damp basement that I am not looking through him. I am looking at him, and I see everything. "Mom," he whispers. I reach into my apron pocket and pull out a white envelope. It is not the second mortgage application. It is a copy of the indemnity bond Sarah sent to my post office box 3 days ago, which she obtained during her divorce proceedings when Julian's personal assets were audited. I hand it to him. "I found this in the mail, Leo," I say. "It was sent here by mistake last month. It has your signature on it, and it has a notice of default from the underwriting bank." Leo's fingers tremble so violently that the paper makes a dry, rustling sound in the quiet basement. He stares at the indemnity bond, his eyes moving rapidly across the lines of legal print, stopping on his own signature at the bottom of the page. The yellow basement light catches the perspiration bead on his temple. It tracks slowly down his cheek, disappearing into his collar. "Mom," he whispers, his voice cracking like dry wood. I didn't know. Julian told me it was just a formality. He said it was a temporary backing for a commercial lease. He said his firm was expanding, and he just needed a second name on the ledger to satisfy the underwriters. "I know, Leo," I say. I keep my voice gentle, refusing to let the coldness in my heart touch the way I speak to my youngest child. Julian is very persuasive. "He told me last week that the escrow had cleared," Leo says, his eyes filling with tears that he is too ashamed to let fall. He looks up at me, his face twisted in a mixture of fear and profound confusion. "He told me we were safe. If this default goes through, Mom, the bank will freeze my accounts. They'll take my townhouse. I won't have anything left." The most painful betrayal is never the loss of the asset. It is the sudden, blinding realization of how cheaply you were sold. Julian did not just risk Leo's financial future. He traded it for a few more days of breathing room. He knew Leo would never ask to see the bank statements. He knew Leo's loyalty would make him an easy shield. Why would he do this to me? Leo's voice is barely a whimper now. He sinks onto one of the dusty cardboard boxes, his head in his hands. I'm his brother. Julian is drowning, Leo, I say, stepping closer and placing a hand on his hunched shoulder. His flannel shirt is warm, damp from his sweat, and when a man is drowning, he doesn't think about who he is pulling under with him. He only thinks about the air he needs right now. I let him sit there for a moment, listening to his shallow, ragged breathing. The cellar draft stirs the dust around our feet. What are we going to do? Leo asks, looking up at me. There is a desperate, childlike plea in his eyes. He is 36, but right now he is looking at his mother to fix the world. Should I call him? Should I tell him I know? No, I say, my voice turning firm, absolute. You will not call him. You will not tell him anything. He blinks, wiping his nose with the back of his sleeve. But Tuesday, he's coming with the notary. He's going to make you sign those papers. I know, I say, and we are going to let him come. But Mom, if you sign those papers, you lose the house. He's already listed it, Sarah told you. I have no intention of signing anything that will give Julian control of this house, Leo, I say, offering him a small, cold smile. But Julian needs to believe that everything is going exactly according to his plan, until the very moment the trap closes. I reach into my pocket and pull out a second piece of paper. It is a letter I drafted this morning, addressed to the State Licensing Board and the Attorney General's office, detailing the unauthorized use of my name on the second mortgage application, complete with the forensic comparison of my signature and Julian's handwriting samples from his old school records and business filings. On Tuesday at noon, Julian will arrive with Mr. Vance, I say, my voice steady and measured. And you will be here too, Leo, just as he planned. You will sit at the dining table, and you will play the part of the supportive brother who is glad to see his mother being taken care of. Leo looks at the draft letter, his face pale. And then, what happens when you refuse to sign? I won't refuse, I say. Not immediately. I will ask questions. I will let Julian explain the tax benefits in front of Mr. Vance. I want Mr. Vance, who is, after all, an officer of the court, to put his explanations on the record. And then, when Julian thinks he has won, I will show them both the trust documents, and I will show them the police report I will have filed on Monday morning regarding the identity theft. Leo stands up quickly, his hands shaking. Mom, you can't. If you file that report, Julian goes to prison. He'll be ruined. It'll destroy the family. Julian destroyed this family when he put a price tag on his mother's house and his brother's life, Leo, I say. My voice is quiet, but it has the weight of 40 years of endured silence behind it. I have spent my life saving my children from the consequences of their own actions. I patched your scraped knees. I paid your debts. I kept your secrets. But I did not raise you to be wolves, and I will not allow one of my sons to devour the other while I am still warm enough to stand between you. Leo stares at me, the reality of my words sinking into him. He wants to argue, to beg for Julian, but he looks down at the default notice in his hand, and the words die in his throat. But Mom, Leo says, his voice dropping into a terrified whisper, you don't understand the whole plan, Julian. He isn't just bringing Mr. Vance on Tuesday. I freeze. The damp basement air suddenly feels much colder. What do you mean? Julian was talking to his lawyer on Friday, Leo says, his eyes darting to the cellar stairs as if he expects his brother to be standing there. He told me he had to make sure there was a backup plan in case you got difficult or started asking too many questions. He's bringing a Dr. Mercer with him on Tuesday, the doctor who treated Dad before he died. Dr. Mercer? I repeat, my heart tightening. He retired 3 years ago. Julian paid him, Leo says, his voice trembling. He paid him for a private evaluation. He's going to claim you've been showing signs of moderate cognitive decline. If you refuse to sign the trust amendment, Julian is going to present Dr. Mercer's assessment to the probate court on Wednesday morning to have himself appointed as your legal guardian. He told me it's the only way to bypass the trust restrictions if you turn stubborn. He has the emergency guardianship petition already drafted, Mom. He's going to declare you incompetent. The damp basement air seems to turn to solid glass around me. I cannot draw a full breath. Incompetent, I repeat the word, testing its weight on my tongue. It feels heavy, metallic, and entirely foreign. To declare a woman incompetent is to perform a clean, bloodless execution. They do not need to lock you in an attic anymore. They only need to convince a judge that your memories are just shadows on a wall, that your protests are merely the agitation of a decaying mind. If Julian succeeds, my signature is no longer required for anything. The trust fall into his hands like a ripe plum, and I will be reduced to a ward, a line item on his monthly ledger. And Dr. Mercer. I remember him sitting in our living room after Arthur passed, drinking Arthur's scotch and weeping. He had been our family doctor for 30 years, a man who had delivered Leo and treated Julian's broken collarbone when he fell off the garage roof. But Mercer's practice had been sued 5 years ago for a misdiagnosed heart condition, and his retirement had been hasty, shadowed by a quiet, expensive settlement. He was 81 now, living in a crumbling Victorian house on the edge of town, his own mind beginning to fray around the edges. Julian had found his weak point, perhaps money, or perhaps the simple fear of being forgotten, and had bought his signature. Mom, Leo's voice is frantic now. He reaches out, his hand hovering near my elbow but not quite touching me, as if he is afraid I might shatter. Are you okay? We have to stop them. We have to call the police right now. I look at Leo. The panic in his face is real, but it is the panic of a victim who has just realized he is trapped in the cellar. If we call the police now, Julian will deny everything. He will claim the draft petition was just preparedness, that he was only acting out of concern for my welfare, Doctor. Mercer will retreat into his credentials, and I will look like an old paranoid woman who is indeed losing her grip on reality. When a family wants to silence a mother, I say, my voice dropping into a register so quiet it is almost a whisper. They rely on her being loud. They want her to scream, Leo. They want her to cry and accuse them, because a screaming woman is easy to dismiss. A screaming woman looks exactly like what they want her to be. I take a deep breath, the damp air filling my lungs, grounding me. We are not going to scream, I say. Then what? We are going to let them see what absolute clarity looks like, say. Go home, Leo. Take the lemon squares. Eat them. On Monday, you will go to work. You will answer Julian's calls. You will sound nervous, because you are nervous, but you will tell him you'll be here on Tuesday to help him manage me. Do you understand? Leo swallows hard, his throat clicking in the silence. He looks at me for a long, searching moment, seeing perhaps for the first time that his mother is not just a woman who washes dishes and weeds hydrangeas. Okay, he says quietly. Okay, Mom, I'll do it. I watch his car pull out of the driveway, the red taillights disappearing into the gray Sunset afternoon. I do not waste any time. I walk to the kitchen and look at the wall clock. It is nearly 2. I dial the number for Dr. Aris's office. He is my primary physician, a sharp young specialist who has managed my osteoarthritis for 10 years. On Sunday, the office is closed, but I press the option to reach the on-call service and request a call back for a non-emergency medical consultation. Within 20 minutes, my phone rings. Mrs. Bennett. Dr. Aris's voice is warm, slightly hurried. Is everything all right? Are you having joint pain? No, doctor. Aris, my joints are tolerably well today, I say, sitting at my kitchen desk and opening a fresh legal pad. But I have an unusual request. I need to schedule a comprehensive cognitive and neuropsychological evaluation, and I need it done tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? Dr. Aris pauses. Is something wrong, Clara? Have you had a fall or an episode of disorientation? No, I say, my voice steady and firm. I am perfectly oriented, but I am currently updating my estate planning, and my attorney has advised me that due to some recent family complexities, it would be prudent to have a certified independent assessment of my mental capacity on file with the state database before we sign the new trust documents on Tuesday. I want to ensure there is no room for anyone to challenge my decisions later. A quiet hum of understanding comes over the line. Doctor. Aris is a doctor, but he is also a man who deals with the elderly and their families every day. He knows the ugly shapes inheritance disputes can take. I see, he says, his tone turning professional and supportive. Actually, Dr. Chen, our staff neuropsychologist, has an opening at 9 tomorrow morning due to a cancellation. I'll put you in that slot myself, Clara. We'll run the full battery. The Montreal Cognitive Assessment, the memory recall, the executive function tests. We'll have the certified results uploaded to your medical portal by Monday afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Aris, I say. You have no idea how much this means to me. Of course, Clara. I'll see you tomorrow. I hang up. One leg of the table is secure now. I need the legal leg. I do not call the lawyer Julian uses. I call David Henderson. David's father, old Mr. Henderson was Arthur's lawyer for 40 years, and David took over the practice when his father retired. He is a quiet, meticulous man who still keeps his offices in the old brick building near the courthouse. When I reach him at his home, he listens to my explanation without interrupting once. Clara, David says, his voice grave when I finish, what you're describing is incredibly serious. If Julian attempts to present a fraudulent capacity assessment to the probate court, it is not just civil fraud, it's a criminal offense. But we need to be very careful. If we preempt him too early, he'll withdraw the petition and find another way to lock up the assets. I don't want him to withdraw it, David, I say. I want him to present it. A sharp silence falls over the line. Clara, David hesitates. Are you sure? I am 68, David, I say, looking out the window at the darkening yard. I have spent my entire life protecting my family from the truth of what they are. It has only made them weak. On Tuesday, I want the truth to have a full public hearing. I want you to be here at 11:30, 30 minutes before Julian's meeting. I'll be there, David says. Then he clears his throat, a hesitant, uncomfortable sound. But Clara, there's something else you need to know. I ran a quick preliminary title search on the property registry yesterday after you called to ask about the trust terms. And Julian didn't just apply for that second mortgage, David says softly. 3 months ago, he filed a quitclaim deed for the half-acre parcel of land behind your house, the lot where your garden sits. It was transferred from the Bennett Family Trust to a company called Apex Properties LLC, which is registered to Julian's home address. The signature on the transfer deed is your name, Clara. He's already sold the garden. The garden was where I went when Arthur died. For 3 months after the funeral, I did not speak to anyone but the grocery delivery boy. I spent my mornings on my knees in the dirt, digging into the cold, gray earth, pulling out wild mustard and dandelion roots until my fingernails were split and black. I planted the hydrangeas because they are stubborn things. They survive the frost, and they bloom even when the soil is sour. Arthur and I bought that half-acre from our neighbors, the Millers, in '84, so the boys would have a place to run. Julian's first swing set stood on that grass. Leo's rabbit is buried near the birch tree, and Julian sold it 3 months ago. He didn't just plan to dismantle my life. He had already begun the demolition while I was sitting in the living room, knitting socks for his daughter. He had partitioned my home, selling the dirt under my feet to a developer who would turn my hydrangeas into a gravel parking lot. Clara, David's voice on the phone is quiet, waiting for the storm. Thank you for telling me, David, I say. My voice does not shake. I will see you on Tuesday at 11:30. I hang up the receiver. I do not cry. I have reached that specific cold plateau of grief where tears are no longer useful. When you have spent 40 years managing a household, you learn that a spill is not a tragedy. It is simply something that requires a bucket and a cloth. Julian has made a very large mess, and I am going to clean it. On Monday morning at 9 o'clock, I sit in the bright, sterile office of Dr. Chen. The room smells of rubbing alcohol and industrial carpet. Dr. Chen is a young woman with a kind, serious face and hair pulled back in a neat bun. She sits across from me with a tablet on her lap. We're going to do some standard cognitive exercises today, Mrs. Bennett, she says, her voice gentle. Some of them might seem a bit simple, but they help us map different areas of your brain function. Are you ready? I am ready, I say. She asks me the date, the year, the day of the week. I answer without hesitation. She tells me 5 words: velvet, daisy, church, red, face. She asks me to remember them. Then she hands me a blank sheet of paper and a black pen. I'd like you to draw a clock face, Mrs. Bennett. Put in all the numbers and set the hands to 10 minutes past 11. My hand is stiff. The arthritis in my thumb makes the pen feel clumsy, but I grip it firmly. I draw a circle. It is not perfect, but it is round, closed, and steady. I place the 12, the 6, the 3, the 9. I draw the hour hand pointing to the 11, and the minute hand pointing to the 2. Very good, Dr. Chen says. Now can you subtract 7 from 100 and keep subtracting 7 from each number you get? 93, I say, looking her directly in the eyes. 86, 79, 72, 65. We continue for 40 minutes. I spell world backward. I identify a drawing of a rhinoceros. I repeat a complex sentence exactly as she said it. At the end, Dr. Chen smiles. It is a genuine smile, free of the professional pity I have grown to detest. Well, Mrs. Bennett, your score is 30 out of 30. Your cognitive function, your memory retention, and your executive processing are in the 98th percentile for your age group. I'll upload the certified report to Dr. Aris right now. Thank you, Dr. Chen, I say, rising and smoothing my gray wool skirt. I appreciate your thoroughness. Children often forget that a mother's mind is the first archive of their lives. She is the one who remembers their first words, their first lies, their first thefts. She does not lose her mind simply because she has grown quiet. I do not go straight home. Instead, I drive to Elm Street. Dr. Mercer's Victorian house is in a state of advanced neglect. The paint is peeling in long, pale ribbons from the porch pillars, and the yard is choked with damp, brown oak leaves. I walk up the wooden steps, my boots clicking on the soft timber, and ring the brass bell. It takes a long time for the door to open. When it does, Richard Mercer stands there. He is wearing a faded cardigan with a tear at the elbow, and his eyes are clouded with cataracts. He looks at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, before his face settles into a look of profound, agonizing guilt. "Clara," he says, his voice raspy. I didn't expect you." "May I come in, Richard?" I ask, my voice gentle but unyielding. He hesitates, then steps back, allowing me into the dark, dusty hallway. The house smells of old soup and damp paper. He leads me to his study, where piles of medical journals lie covered in dust on the desk. "Julian came to see me, Clara," Richard says, before I can even sit down. He is shaking, his old hands clutching the lapels of his cardigan. "He was so worried about you. He brought me evidence." "Evidence?" I ask, sitting in the green leather chair by the cold fireplace. "Your journal," Richard says, reaching into his desk drawer and pulling out a small blue notebook. "Julian said he found it in your nightstand. He said you'd been writing in it for months. He showed me the entries. They were highly disorganized, rambling. You wrote about Arthur as if he were still alive, Clara. You wrote about seeing people in the garden who weren't there." He hands me the notebook. I open it. The handwriting is a clever imitation of my own, but it is written in blue ballpoint pen. I have not used a ballpoint pen in 20 years. I only write with the black fountain pen Arthur gave me for my 50th birthday. I turn the page. The entries are indeed rambling, a pathetic caricature of dementia. But as I scan the forged pages, my eyes stop on an entry dated August 14th. The forgery reads, "Arthur told me today that we must hide the money from the Henderson sale," he said. "The girl from the hotel is still looking for us." I feel the blood drain from my face. Julian did not write this to convince Richard Mercer I had dementia. He wrote this because he had found Arthur's old safe in the attic, the one I thought was locked forever, and he had found the papers regarding the hotel in Chicago. He was using the forgery to drop a hint, a quiet threat to me, that he knew our family's darkest secret. The carbon receipts from '72 were kept in a small leather ledger with a brass lock. Arthur had gone to Chicago for a hardware convention. He was 32, ambitious and lonely, in a way I had not yet learned to recognize. Her name was Evelyn. She was a receptionist at the hotel, where the convention was held. When she wrote to Arthur 6 months later, she did not ask for money. She asked for a name. Arthur came to me on his knees in this very kitchen. He wept until his shirt was damp, confessing everything, expecting me to pack my bags and take the boys to my sisters in Ohio. But I did not leave. I looked at my young sons sleeping in their rooms, and I looked at Arthur, who was a good man who had made a terrible mistake. We made a quiet agreement. Every month for 18 years, I was the one who walked to the bank and purchased the cashier's check sent to a private trust in Indianapolis to ensure Evelyn's daughter had a home and an education. We never spoke her name again. We buried the ledger in the floorboards of the attic safe, believing the silence of 30 years had turned the shame into dust. But Julian had dug it up. He was using the ghost of his father's infidelity to threaten me, letting me know that if I fought him on the house, he would plaster Arthur's shame across the town, destroying the memory of the father Leo and the grandchildren idolized. Richard, I say, my voice dropping into a quiet, frozen register that makes the old doctor flinch. You know my handwriting. You have read my letters for 30 years. You knew this journal was a fake the moment Julian handed it to you. Richard Mercer lowers his head. His thin white hair falls over his forehead and his shoulders sink. He told me you were going to lose the house anyway, Clara, he whispers. He said the creditors were going to foreclose. He said if I signed the assessment, he could salvage enough of the equity to buy you the condo and pay off my medical debts. Clara, my granddaughter in Boston, she has a rare heart lesion. The insurance won't cover the specialist. I have nothing left to give her. I'm 81 and I'm broke. The secrets we keep to protect our children are often the very stones they use to build our first gallows. Julian had mapped everyone's desperation. He knew Mercer's poverty, Leo's guilt, and my desire to protect Arthur's memory. He had woven them all into a web, believing himself to be the spider. Richard, I say, reaching into my handbag. I pull out my phone and open the medical portal. I slide the screen across the dusty desk toward him. This is my cognitive report from 9 o'clock this morning. It is signed by Dr. Chen and Dr. Harris. It certifies my mental capacity at 30 out of 30. Richard stares at the screen. His eyes water and he lets out a long, ragged sigh that sounds like a dying fire. If you sign Julian's petition tomorrow, I continue, my voice entirely devoid of anger. David Henderson will file a formal complaint with the medical board and the state police by 1 o'clock. They will audit your files. They will find the forged journal. You will not only lose your license, Richard. You will lose your pension, and you will spend the remaining years of your life in a court of law. Your granddaughter will not get her surgery. She will get your public disgrace. He covers his face with his hands. He begins to weep, the dry, silent tears of an old man who has run out of options. I don't want to destroy you, Richard, I say softly. You were Arthur's friend. You delivered my children. Write down what Julian did. Write a statement admitting that he brought you a forged journal and offered you $40,000 to sign a predated competency assessment. Sign it and have your nurse notarize it today. And the money, he asks, looking up, his eyes red. My granddaughter. I still have Arthur's private investment account, I say. The one Julian doesn't know about because it was never part of the estate registry. I will wire $30,000 to the Boston clinic tomorrow morning. Not as a bribe, Richard, but because I remember when you stayed up all night in our kitchen when Julian croup, holding him over a pot of steaming water because you were afraid he wouldn't make it to the hospital. I do not forget a kindness, but I do not tolerate a betrayal. 10 minutes later, I walk out of the Victorian house carrying a 2-page handwritten statement signed by Richard Mercer and witnessed and notarized by his home care nurse who had just arrived. I drive home in the gathering dusk. The wind is rising, rattling the dry oak branches against the roof of my car. By 6 o'clock, I am back in my kitchen. The house is cold, so I turn on the oven and put in a small chicken to roast. I sit at the table, the notarized statement lying next to my teacup. The telephone on the wall rings. The sound is sharp, piercing the silence. I stand up and answer it. Hey, Mom. Julian's voice is warm, bright, and completely relaxed. Just wanted to check in. Leo and I are still on for tomorrow at noon. Mr. Vance has the paperwork ready. That's fine, Julian, I say, keeping my tone perfectly neutral, the voice of the mother he expects. I have some chicken roasting. I'll make a nice salad for us. That sounds great, Mom. You don't have to overdo it, though. We'll get the papers signed, and then maybe we can take a walk in the garden. It's a beautiful evening. Yes, I say. The garden is very peaceful. Excellent. Well, get some rest, Mom. Don't stay up late cleaning. I won't, Julian. Good. Oh, by the way, Mom. Julian's tone shifts, dropping just a fraction of an octave, becoming casual in a way that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I saw your car was out today, down on Elm Street. I thought you didn't like driving in the autumn damp. Is everything okay? Richard called me on Saturday, Julian, I say, my voice carrying that slightly soft, nostalgic tone I have used for years to keep my sons from looking too closely at me. He was looking for your father's old brass putter, the one with the leather grip Arthur used to keep in the umbrella stand. He said he wanted to polish it for old time's sake. I didn't want him to have to walk down here in the damp, so I took it to him. There is a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. I can hear Julian's breathing, slow and calculated, as he weighs my words against whatever alert had popped up on his computer screen. The putter, he says finally, the tension in his voice easing just a fraction, though his professional warmth does not return. Right. Well, you should have let me handle that, Mom. I could have dropped it off on my way to the office. You shouldn't be running errands in this weather. We're going to take all that off your plate starting tomorrow anyway. That's very kind of you, Julian, I say. I'll see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow, Mom. I hang up the phone. I look down at my hand, still holding the plastic receiver. Then I look at my mobile phone sitting on the counter. It is a modern phone, a gift from Julian last Christmas. He had insisted on setting it up for me to make sure you have the emergency contact numbers programmed. I realize now that he didn't just program numbers. He had installed a location sharing app under the guise of a family safety package. He has been watching my movements from his desk, tracking his mother like an asset he needed to secure before liquidation. I take the phone, walk to the pantry, and place it deep inside a tin of flour. Let him track the kitchen pantry. Tuesday morning arrives with a thin, watery light that barely penetrates the gray clouds. The wind has died down, leaving the air heavy and cold, smelling of wet earth and dying leaves. I wake at 6. I do not wear my housecoat today. I dress in my dark blue knit dress, the one I wore to Arthur's memorial service. It is simple, dignified, and fits me well. I brush my hair back and pins it neatly. I do not look like a woman who is losing her grip. I look like a woman who is ready to receive guests. By 10, the roast chicken is in the oven, filling the house with a warm, savory scent that contradicts the coldness in my chest. I set the dining table. I use the mahogany table, the 2 leaves fully extended. I place 4 place settings, the blue willow plates, the polished silver, and the heavy linen napkins. The hardest part of a structural collapse is never the falling of the beams. It is the absolute silence of the foundation right before it gives way. For 40 years, this house has been held together by my quiet labor. Every meal, every wash sheet, every polished floorboard was a nail keeping the walls upright. Today, I am pulling the nails out one by one. At exactly 11:30, David Henderson's sedan pulls into the gravel driveway. He walks up the porch steps carrying a thick black leather briefcase. He looks solemn, his dark eyes filled with a quiet professional determination when he shakes my hand. "Clara," he says, stepping into the hallway. "You look very well." "Thank you, David." "Come into the dining room. I've set a place for you." We sit at the table. David opens his briefcase and pulls out a stack of documents. "I verified the quitclaim deed on the garden lot," David says, his voice low. "It was filed on August 12th. It was notarized by Marcus Vance, the same notary Julian is bringing today. Clara, Vance certified that you appeared before him and signed that deed. Since you were at a church retreat in Ohio on August 12th, we have absolute, undeniable proof of notary fraud. That's a Class C felony in this state. If we present this, Vance's career is over, and the developer's title on the garden is completely void." "Good," I say, my fingers tracing the pattern on my teacup. "And the statement from Dr. Mercer?" "It's perfect," David says, pulling out the notarized pages I had secured yesterday. Mercer's admission that Julian's offered him a financial kickback to sign a predated competency evaluation is enough to have any guardianship petition thrown out of court instantly. It also subjects Julian to criminal charges for attempted exploitation of an elder. I look at the papers spread across the mahogany wood. The trap is built. The steel is cold and heavy. All we are waiting for is Julian to step onto the plate. But at 11:45, the front door latch rattles violently. It is not the firm, polite knock of a guest. It is the frantic, desperate shaking of someone trying to force the lock. The door bursts open. Leo stands in the hallway. His hair is disheveled, his coat unbuttoned, and his eyes are wide with panic. He is panting, his pale and slick with sweat. He doesn't even look at David. He runs straight to the dining table and grabs my shoulders. "Mom," Leo gasps, his chest heaving. "Mom, you have to leave now." "David, get her out of here." "Leo, calm down," I say, placing my hands over his cold fingers. "What is it?" "Mercer," Leo chokes out, a sob catching in his throat. "Mercer called Julian last night." After you left, Mercer got terrified. He realized what he'd signed for you, and he realized he was going to lose everything. He called Julian and confessed. He told Julian, "You have the signed statement." Leo reaches into his pocket and pulls out his phone, his hand shaking so badly he nearly drops it. "Julian is on his way," Leo whispers, his voice cracked with terror. "He's not bringing Mr. Vance anymore. He called me 20 minutes ago and told me he's bringing a private security transport and Mercer's emergency petition. He filed it online this morning. He told the sheriff that Leo and David Henderson have manipulated you into signing over your assets and that you are in immediate physical danger. Mom, the sheriff's deputy is driving Julian here right now to serve an emergency protective custody order. They are coming to take you away. An ex parte emergency order is a fragile thing, Clara," David says, his voice losing none of its professional steel as he stands up from the table. "It is granted based solely on a sworn affidavit of immediate danger. But it has no legal standing if the subject has legal counsel present, can demonstrate immediate, verified capacity, and there is no evidence of physical coercion. If we run, we validate Julian's claim. If we stay, we are simply a family having lunch with their attorney." "David is right, Leo," I say, my voice steady as I smooth the linen napkin on my lap. "Sit down. Pour yourself a glass of water. Your hands are shaking." "Mom, you don't understand," Leo whispers, his eyes darting to the window. "Julian he's completely out of his mind. He's ruined. He has nothing left to lose." "Then he has already lost," I say. "Sit down, Leo." He hesitates, then sinks into his chair, his face pale and wet. I walk into the kitchen. The roast chicken is golden, the skin bubbling quietly in the glass dish. I turn off the oven, lift the heavy kettle, and pour the boiling water into my ceramic teapot. The scent of chamomile and lemon rises into the warm air. I place the teapot, 4 cups, and a jar of honey on a silver tray. When a desperate man uses the law as a hammer, he forgets that the law is also a mirror. It reflects the hand that holds it with absolute indifference. Julian believes the authority of the county sheriff will protect him from the consequences of his choices. He does not realize that the law does not care about his debts, his ambition, or his pride. It only cares about the paper. As I carry the tray back into the dining room, the sound of tires on gravel cuts through the quiet house. I look through the window. A white county sheriff's SUV pulls to a stop near the hydrangeas, its red and blue lights pulsing silently against the gray sky. Behind it is Julian's black luxury sedan. 2 men get out of the SUV. Deputy Miller, a young, thick-shouldered man I have seen at the local diner, and a man in a dark, cheap suit carrying a leather folder. Julian gets out of his sedan. He is wearing his best charcoal suit, but his tie is slightly crooked, and his hair, usually so meticulously styled, is damp from the mist. They walk up the wooden porch steps. The heavy front door latch rattles, and then the door is pushed open. "Mom!" Julian's voice precedes him, loud, breathless, and dripping with a manufactured, frantic concern. "Mom!" "Thank God you're okay." He bursts into the dining room, followed closely by Deputy Miller and the man in the suit. "Deputy, there they are," Julian says immediately, pointing a trembling finger at David and Leo. "That's David Henderson. He's been isolating her since Sunday, and my brother Leo. He's been helping him. They've been trying to force her to sign trust amendments to cover Leo's personal debts. I have the emergency protective order right here. Julian reaches for the leather folder the man in the suit is holding. But Deputy Miller steps forward, his hand resting casually on his utility belt. He looks at the room. He sees a warm, wood-paneled dining room. He smells roasted chicken and chamomile tea. He sees an old woman in a neat blue dress, calmly pouring tea into delicate porcelain cups. He sees David Henderson, a respected local attorney whose father's portrait hangs in the county courthouse, sitting quietly with a briefcase. And he sees Leo, looking terrified, but sitting at a set table with a napkin on his lap. There are no locked doors. There are no bruises. There is only a family lunch. Mrs. Bennett? Deputy Miller asks, his voice polite but cautious. Clara Bennett? I am, Deputy, I say, placing the teapot down on its trivet. Would you like a cup of tea? It's a very damp morning. No, thank you, ma'am, Miller says, his eyes moving from me to Julian, then to David. We received an emergency petition this morning, alleging that you were being held against your will and subjected to financial elder abuse by Mr. Henderson and your younger son. I see, I say, offering the deputy a small, tired smile. Julian has always had a very vivid imagination. Please, sit down. This isn't a joke, deputy. Julian snaps, his voice rising, a thin, desperate edge breaking through his polish. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying. Doctor, Mercer completed her evaluation on Friday. She has advanced cognitive decline. She's being manipulated. Serve the custody order so we can get her to the clinic. David Henderson stands up slowly. He does not raise his voice. He opens his briefcase, pulls out 2 folders and places them on the table. Deputy Miller, David says, his voice carrying the calm, absolute authority of a man who spent 20 years in a courtroom. My name is David Henderson. I am the legal counsel for the Bennett Family Trust, of which Mrs. Clara Bennett is the sole active trustee. I have 2 documents I would like you to review before you proceed with any action regarding this fraudulent petition. David slides the first folder toward the deputy. This is a certified comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation of Clara Bennett, completed yesterday morning at 9 o'clock by Dr. Chen and Dr. Aris at the County Medical Center. It certifies her cognitive function at a perfect 30 out of 30, placing her in the 98th percentile of mental capacity. It was uploaded directly to the state medical registry yesterday afternoon. Deputy Miller takes the folder, opening it and scanning the official hospital seal and the doctor's signatures. Julian's face turns the color of curdled milk. He takes a step forward, his hand outstretched. That's a lie. She had her friends falsify that. Dr. Mercer's assessment. Dr. Mercer. David interrupts, sliding the second folder toward the deputy, has signed a notarized retraction. In this statement, completed yesterday afternoon, Doctor, Mercer admits under penalty of perjury that Mr. Julian Bennett provided him with forged journals and offered him a $40,000 financial kickback from the unauthorized sale of the trust property to falsify a capacity evaluation. Deputy Miller reads the notarized statement. His face hardens. He slowly closes the folder, turns his head, and looks directly at Julian. Mr. Bennett, Deputy Miller says, his voice dropping into a cold, dangerous register. Did you sign a sworn affidavit this morning stating, under penalty of perjury, that your mother had not been evaluated by a licensed physician in the last year? Julian's mouth opens, but no sound comes out. His chest rises and falls in short, shallow hitches. He looks at Deputy Miller, then at the folders on the table, and finally at the man in the dark suit, the private transport worker he had hired to escort me to the clinic. The transport worker is already stepping back toward the hallway. He is a professional. He knows the difference between a standard custodial transfer and a kidnapping charge. He closes his leather folder with a sharp snap. "I'm out," the man says, his voice flat. "This is a civil dispute. I'm not getting sued for unlawful restraint. Good luck, Mr. Bennett." He turns on his heel and walks out the front door, leaving the drafty hallway open to the damp November air. "Julian," Deputy Miller says, his hand moving to his belt, his posture turning rigid and official. "I asked you a question. Did you sign a sworn affidavit stating your mother had no recent medical evaluations?" I was acting on the information Dr. Mercer gave me," Julian stammers, his polish completely gone now, his face slick with sweat. He reaches into his jacket, his hand shaking. "I was trying to protect her. Mercer told me she was declining. I didn't know about yesterday's test." "I swear, Deputy." "And did you also protect her?" David Henderson asks, his voice cutting through Julian's panic like a scalpel. "By forging her signature on a quitclaim deed for the garden lot and having Marcus Vance notarize it without her presence. Because that deed was filed 3 months ago, Julian. The district attorney has already issued a subpoena for Vance's notary log." Julian takes a half-step back, his boots squeaking on the hardwood. He looks at Lilo, his eyes wild, silently pleading for his brother to say something, to step between him and the edge of the cliff. But Leo does not move. He sits at the table, his eyes fixed on his water glass, his face set in a mask of cold, exhausted disappointment. He has finally stopped climbing the tree. "Julian," I say. The word is quiet. It is the same tone I used when he was 10 years old and had broken his arm trying to keep him calm while we waited for the ambulance. He stops, his eyes locking onto mine. "I washed your dishes on Sunday, Julian," I say softly. "I scrubbed the grease from your plate. I wiped down this table. For 40 years I have made sure this house was warm, that there was food on the stove, and that your father's name was respected. And while I was standing at that sink, with my hands in the hot water, I heard you laughing about selling my garden and putting me in a concrete box by the highway so you could clear your trading debts." The silence in the dining room is absolute. The only sound is the slow, rhythmic drip-drip of the kitchen faucet. Even Deputy Miller looks away, his jaw tightening with a sudden, deep discomfort. A mother can survive her children's anger, their distance, and even their neglect. But she cannot survive the moment she realizes they look at her and see only a transaction. Julian did not see a mother when he looked at me. He saw an equity release. He saw $350,000. "Mom," Julian whispers, his voice cracking. I was going to pay it back. I was going to take care of you. The townhouse, it has a pool. It's warm. I was just trying to save the business." "You were trying to save yourself, Julian," I say. "And you were willing to let Leo take the default on the indemnity bond to do it." You were willing to let your brother lose his home so you could keep yours. Julian's face undergoes a sudden, terrifying transformation. The desperation vanishes, replaced by a cold, dark venom. He realizes the legal trap has closed. He realizes the deputy is not going to serve the custody order, and that David Henderson has him blocked at every turn. He looks at me, his eyes narrowing into slits. He smiles, a small, ugly twist of his mouth that makes him look entirely like a stranger. "You think you're so smart, don't you, Clara?" he says, dropping the mom entirely, his voice dripping with a bitter, defensive poison. He turns to Leo, who finally looks up. "You think she's a saint, Leo? You think she's protecting this family? Ask her about Evelyn." Leo frowns, his eyes moving from Julian to me. "Who is Evelyn? Ask her." Julian sneers, taking a step toward the table, ignoring the deputy's warning hand on his arm. "Ask her about the bank drafts she's been sending to Indianapolis for 30 years. Ask her about the sister we have who got a private college education paid for by Dad's money while we were taking out student loans. Our perfect father, Leo, the one she spent 10 years making us worship. He was a cheat, and she covered it up. She used the family money to pay off his mistress." Julian looks back at me, his eyes gleaming with a sick, triumphant light. He believes he has found the crack in my wall. He believes that by destroying Arthur's memory, he can finally break my silence. "Tell him, Clara," Julian whispers. "Tell Leo how Dad really spent his business trips." I look at my eldest son. I feel no anger. I feel only a profound, hollow pity for a man who has traded his soul for a ledger and still has nothing to show for it. "I don't have to tell him, Julian," I say, reaching into my apron pocket and pulling out the blue notebook. "Because you already wrote it all down in your fake journal, and you signed Dr. Mercer's name to it." Leo's eyes are wide, fixed on me with a raw, bleeding hurt that has nothing to do with the house or the trust. "Mom, is it true? Did Dad?" I look at my youngest son. I do not look away. "Yes, Leo," I say, my voice steady, stripped of all shame. "Your father had a daughter. Her name is Grace. She is 36 now. But it was not family money we used to support her, Leo. It was my own. The inheritance my sister left me when she passed. Your father worked 14 hours a day at the hardware store to ensure you boys had a roof over your heads and food on this table. We did not touch your college funds. Julian took out student loans because he refused to go to the state university we could afford. He insisted on the private business school because he wanted to look important." Julian lets out a sharp, bitter laugh, but it is cut short as Deputy Miller's hand grips his shoulder with a firm, professional pressure. "Mr. Bennett, that's enough," the deputy says, his voice flat and unyielding. "You've filed a false police report, and you've signed a sworn affidavit containing false statements to secure an emergency custody order. Mr. Henderson has provided documented evidence of fraud and attempted elder exploitation. We're going to step outside now. You're coming with me to the station." "Deputy, you can't do this," Julian says, his voice cracking as the steel of the handcuffs clicks around his wrists. "This is a family matter. My mother is. Your mother is a cooperative witness in a criminal investigation, Mr. Bennett," Deputy Miller says, guiding Julian toward the hallway. "Let's go." I stand in the dining room, watching my eldest son being led out of my house in handcuffs. His expensive leather shoes squeak on the floorboards. He does not look back at me. Through the window, I watch the deputy place Julian in the back of the SUV. The blue and red lights continue to pulse, casting long, rhythmic shadows across the papery blue hydrangeas. Family secrets are kept in the dark, not because we are ashamed of the dust, but because we are trying to keep the rooms above quiet enough for our children to sleep. Arthur and I had carried that weight together, believing that a family's survival sometimes requires keeping the cracks in the foundation invisible to the people living on the first floor. But Julian had tried to use those cracks to bring the whole house down on top of us. "Mom," Leo whispers, his head in his hands. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have seen what he was doing." I walk to him and place my hand on his head, running my fingers through his hair, just as I did when he was a boy. "You couldn't see, Leo, because you were looking up at him. It is hard to see a man's hands when you are standing in his shadow." David Henderson slowly packs his documents back into his leather briefcase. He looks at me with a deep, quiet respect. "The custody petition is dead, Clara," David says, "and the district attorney will have the arrest warrant for Marcus Vance by tomorrow morning. We've secured the house. The trust is intact." "Thank you, David," I say. "Will you stay for some chicken? It's nearly ready." "I would love to, Clara, but I need to go file the emergency stay with the county registry to freeze any further action on the deed Julian filed for the garden lot. I want to make sure the developer doesn't try anything before the title is officially restored." Before David can close his briefcase, his mobile phone rings. He answers it quickly, his professional lawyer voice returning. "Henderson here." He listens. As the seconds tick by, the warmth leaves his face. His brow furrows and his eyes dart to the window, then back to me. His jaw tightens. "When?" David asks, his voice dropping into a tense, hard register. "Are they there now? Did they show the permit?" A pause. David closes his eyes, his knuckles turning white as he grips the edge of the mahogany table. "All right, I'm on my way. Don't let them touch the boundary markers." He hangs up. He looks at me, his expression grave, stripped of the triumph we had felt just moments before. "Clara," David says, his voice trembling slightly. "That was my secretary, the developer, Apex Properties. They didn't wait for Tuesday to clear the title. Julian signed a pre-possession clearing license last Wednesday in exchange for a $50,000 cash advance to cover his immediate payroll. The license allows them to begin clearing the vegetation on the adjacent lot immediately, regardless of any pending litigation, as long as the deed was active at the time of signing. "The garden," I whisper. "They've just driven a commercial land clearing crew onto the property." David says, his voice tight. "They have a bulldozer and a chainsaw crew, Clara. They've already started clearing the back lot. They're cutting down the birch tree." The kitchen floorboards vibrate with a low, heavy rumble that rattles the cups on the dining table. Then the high metallic scream of a chainsaw cuts through the cold air. I do not run. Running is the gesture of a victim, a woman who believes she has already lost. I walk through the kitchen, open the back door, and step onto the porch. The air is thick with the sweet, sharp scent of fresh-cut pine and the bitter exhaust of a diesel engine. In the backyard, a yellow excavator is positioned near the property line, its metal tracks deep in the wet turf, turning my hydrangea beds into a muddy brown paste. Two men in high-visibility vests are standing near the old paper birch tree, the chainsaw whining in one man's hands, the white bark of the tree. The one Arthur and I planted when Leo was born is already scarred, a deep pale notch cut into its trunk. "Hey!" Leo screams, running past me down the wooden steps. "Hey! Stop! Shut it down." The man with the chainsaw doesn't hear him over the roar of the engine. He steps closer to the birch, the metal teeth of the saw touching the wood, sending a spray of white sawdust into the gray mist. I walk down the steps. My boots sink into the cold mud of my ruined garden, but I do not look down. I walk straight toward the excavator, standing directly in the path of the heavy steel bucket. The excavator operator looks down through his glass cab, his eyes widening. He pulls a lever, and the heavy yellow arm freezes, hovering 5 feet above my head. "Carl!" the operator yells to the man with the chainsaw. "Carl, stop!" The chainsaw operator looks up, sees me standing in the mud, and slowly releases the trigger. The engine whines, sputters, and dies. The sudden silence in the yard is heavy, broken only by the idle chug of the excavator's diesel engine and the steady, cold dripping of the mist from the branches. A man in a yellow hard hat and a muddy canvas jacket steps forward. He looks tired, his face lined with the resignation of a contractor who knows he has walked into a family war zone. "Ma'am, you need to step back," the foreman, Carl, says, his voice raised to carry over the engine. "We have a valid clearing permit from Apex Properties. We're cleared to prep this site for development." "I am Clara Bennett," I say, my voice quiet but perfectly clear in the cold air. "I am the sole trustee of this property. The permit you are holding was secured under a fraudulent deed. The man who signed it has just been arrested, and the notary who certified it is currently in police custody." Carl frowns, looking at Leo, then at David Henderson, who has stepped up beside me, pulling his credentials from his coat pocket. "My name is David Henderson," David says, his voice carrying the calm weight of the county court. "I am the attorney for the Bennett Trust. Carl, if you fell one more tree on this lot, you are committing criminal trespass and willful destruction of property. If that excavator moves another foot, I will have the sheriff's department impound your equipment before the sun goes down today." Carl looks at the scarred birch tree, then at his operator in the cab, and finally at David. He rubs his chin, his gloved hand making a raspy sound against his stubble. "Look, I'm just a subcontractor. I don't want any legal trouble. We were told the title was clean. The title is not clean," David says. "The transfer was a felony forgery. To a developer, the earth is just a blank page, a quiet space to be paved over and sold in neat, profitable squares. They do not understand the soil is actually an archive of a family's life." Leo's rabbit is buried 10 feet from that birch tree. My husband's ashes are scattered under the roots of the hydrangeas they just crushed. You cannot pave over 30 years of love and grief without the ground fighting back. "Carl!" A sharp, arrogant voice barks from the driveway. We all turn. A white luxury pickup truck has pulled onto the grass, its tires spinning in the mud, tearing up the remaining lawn. Out steps Victor Sterling, the principal of Apex Properties. He is a man in his late 40s, wearing a pristine black winter jacket, designer jeans, and expensive leather hiking boots that have clearly never seen actual dirt. He looks furious, his face red from the cold and impatience. "Why are the machines idle?" Sterling demands, marching toward us, ignoring the mud clinging to his boots. "I'm paying $3,000 a day for this crew, Carl. Get that birch down." "Victor, we have a problem," Carl says, pointing to David. "The family's lawyer is here. He says the deed Julian signed was forged. The notary was arrested." Sterling stops. He looks at David, then at me. His eyes are small, cold, and entirely devoid of empathy. He is a man who built his fortune by exploiting the desperate, buying up properties from the bankrupt, and the dying for pennies on the dollar. He knew Julian was drowning when he bought the garden lot. He didn't care. "I don't care about a family dispute," Sterling says, his voice flat, stepping closer to me, trying to use his height to intimidate. "I have a signed contract with Julian Bennett, who presented a valid power of attorney. I paid a $50,000 cash licensing fee to secure immediate land clearing rights. If you want to challenge the deed, do it in court. Carl, start the excavator. Clear the birch." Carl hesitates. "Victor, if the deed is void..." I said, "Start the machines!" Sterling barks. He turns to the excavator driver and gestures wildly. "Get that tree down. She won't stand in front of it once the steel starts moving." The excavator driver looks at me, then at Sterling. His hand hovers over the control lever, and the diesel engine lets out a dark black puff of smoke as he prepares to engage the tracks. The excavator engine roars, a deafening mechanical shriek that shakes the damp air. A cloud of black diesel smoke rises from the exhaust pipe, drifting over the scarred birch tree. The heavy steel buck swings slightly, its teeth glinting in the gray light as the operator prepares to engage the tracks. I do not move. My boots are anchored in the wet black soil of the garden I have tended for 40 years. I look directly at the operator through the glass of his cab. I do not look afraid because I am not. When you have survived the slow, quiet erosion of your life, the sudden threat of moving steel is remarkably simple. Leo steps up beside me, his shoulder pressing against mine. David Henderson steps to my left, his black leather briefcase held firmly at his side. We stand together, 3 people in the mud facing the machine. The excavator driver looks at us. He shakes his head, releases the controls, and reaches for the ignition. "No way, Victor!" The driver yells down to Sterling, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet as the engine sputters and dies. "I'm not running people over. I'm not going to jail for a boundary dispute. I'm shutting it down." Carl, the foreman, takes off his yellow hard hat and slaps it against his thigh, sending a spray of muddy water onto the grass. "We're packing up, Victor. This job is a mess. I'm not getting my contractor's license revoked because you bought a dirty listing. Loader crew, tie down the machines." "I'll sue you, Carl," Sterling screams, his face turning a deep, dangerous purple. He steps closer to the foreman, his fists clenched inside his pristine winter jacket. "I'll break your company. You have a binding contract." "Actually, Mr. Sterling," David Henderson says, stepping forward and opening his briefcase, "you don't." The police froze Julian Bennett's commercial accounts at 10:30 this morning as part of the embezzlement investigation. The $50,000 cash licensing fee you transferred to his firm yesterday was flagged as commingled funds of an active criminal enterprise. It has been seized under the state's asset forfeiture statute. You are now an unsecured creditor in a criminal bankruptcy proceeding. You don't own this land, Mr. Sterling, and you don't have your $50,000. Sterling freezes. He looks at David, then at the folders in the lawyer's hand, and finally at me. The reality of what has happened slowly penetrates his anger, leaving him looking hollowed out, like a building after a fire. Greed blindfolds a man, making him believe his money has granted him the power of a god, until the law gently reminds him he is just a debtor in a clean suit. Sterling had thought he was the predator in this garden. He had thought he was buying a cheap piece of an old woman's life. Now he is just a man standing in the mud with ruined boots and a frozen bank account. Without another word, Sterling turns on his heel and marches back to his white pickup truck. He slams the door, engages the four-wheel drive, and spins his tires, tearing deep, ugly ruts into my wet lawn as he roars down the driveway and vanishes onto the main road. Carl and his crew work in silence, loading the chainsaw into the truck and securing the excavator's tracks. Within 10 minutes, their heavy trailer rumbles out of the driveway, leaving the garden to the quiet dripping of the mist. Leo walks over to the paper birch tree. He reaches out, his hand touching the raw, white wood, where the chainsaw had cut 3 inches deep into the trunk. The sap is weeping from the wound, a clear, sticky liquid that looks like tears against the rough bark. "Mom," Leo says, his voice thick with a quiet, exhausted grief. "The cut is too deep." It went past the sapwood. The first heavy snow or the winter wind, it's going to bring it down. The tree is going to die. I walk to him and place my hand over his on the cold bark. "We will plant another, Leo," I say softly. "Trees are like families. Sometimes the old ones grow too weak to stand the wind, and you have to let them go to make room for something new." "But Dad planted this," Leo whispers. "Your father planted many things, Leo," I say. "Some of them grew straight and some of them grew twisted. But the ground is still here. We can always replant." As the quiet hum of an engine enters the gravel driveway, I turn. A modest silver sedan with Indiana license plates pulls to a stop near the back porch. The engine shuts off. For a long moment, no one gets out. The windshield wipers swipe once, clearing the gray mist, and then the driver's side door swings open. A woman steps out. She is in her mid-30s, wearing a full gray trench coat and a dark wool scarf. She is tall with a quiet, reserved posture. When she looks up, my heart stops for a single heavy beat. She has Arthur's high, sharp cheekbones. She has his deep-set, serious gray eyes. She has the exact, deliberate way of standing that Arthur had when he was thinking about a difficult problem. It is grace. She looks at the scarred birch tree, then at the deep ruts in the muddy lawn, and finally at me. She carries a small, worn leather folder in her hand, the same folder Arthur used to keep his tax receipts in. "Clara?" she asks, her voice quiet, carrying that soft Midwestern drawl I had heard in Arthur's voice for 40 years. "I'm sorry to arrive without warning, but the bank in Indianapolis, they told me the monthly trust draft was returned yesterday with a notice of administrative freeze. I was afraid something had happened to you." The mist clings to the wool of Grace's trench coat, turning the dark gray fabric into a deep, wet charcoal. She stands near the open door of her car, her fingers clutching the worn leather folder. Leo looks at her. I watch the realization settle over his face, softening the hard, angry lines around his mouth. He does not see an enemy. He does not see the shame. Julian had tried to weaponize to shatter our family. He only sees his father's eyes looking back at him from a stranger's face. The silence between them is not cold. It is the quiet, heavy stillness of a room when a window is finally opened after many years. Please come inside, Grace, I say, my voice steady, carrying the warm maternal authority that has defined this house for 4 decades. The mist is turning into rain, and you've had a long drive. David, thank you for everything. I'll see you in your office tomorrow. David Henderson nods, his expression soft as he slides his briefcase closed. He looks at Grace, then at me, offering a quiet, respectful bow of his head before walking to his car. He leaves us, giving the family the privacy the ground has earned. Inside, the dining room smells of roasted chicken and chamomile and tea. I do not adjust the table settings. I had set 4 plates this morning, expecting Julian to sit across from me. Instead, Grace sits in Julian's chair. Leo sits to her right. I sit at the head, where Arthur used to sit. I pour the hot tea. The steam rises between us, a warm, fragrant curtain. I didn't know who you were for a long time, Grace says, her fingers tracing the blue willow pattern on her cup. My mother told me before she died that the monthly drafts came from a private trust, but she never told me the name Bennett. She only told me that a woman named Clara made sure I had a roof over my head and that my tuition was paid. She called you the silent angel. I was not an angel, Grace, I say, offering her a small, honest smile. I was just a wife who loved her husband enough to know he was human, and a mother who believed an innocent child should never have to pay for the mistakes of her parents. Grace looks at Leo, her gray eyes filled with a quiet, hesitant hope. I didn't come here to ask for money, Leo. I have a good life. I teach middle school English in Indianapolis. But when the monthly draft was returned yesterday, the bank manager told me the trust account had been placed under an administrative freeze due to a suspected fraud investigation involving Julian Bennett. I knew Julian's name was on the estate registry. I was afraid he was hurting your mother. Leo swallows hard, his throat clicking in the quiet room. He reaches out, his hand hovering over the mahogany table for a second before he places it near Grace's teacup. He was, Leo says, his voice thick with emotion. He was trying to sell the house. He was trying to take everything. But Mom stopped him. The truth, when it finally arrives, is rarely the loud explosion we spent our lives fearing. It is more like a quiet rain that clears the air after a long, suffocating summer. Julian believed Arthur's secret was a bomb that would destroy me. He did not understand that when you carry a secret with grace and mercy, the secret loses its power to hurt you. It becomes a bridge instead of a wall. Julian always believed he was the only one who knew about me. Grace says, opening the worn leather folder on her lap. She pulls out a thick sealed parchment envelope. But he didn't know everything. Before my father died, he came to see me in Indianapolis. It was the only time he ever visited. He was very sick, and he knew his time was short. She slides the sealed envelope across the table toward me. "He gave me this," Grace says softly. "He told me to keep it in a safe place," he said. "Grace, if the day ever comes that Julian tries to dismantle what your mother, Clara, built, I want you to drive to the house and give her this. It is the only way I can protect her when I'm gone." I look at the yellowed parchment. The wax seal on the back is Arthur's private monogram, the small brass stamp he used to seal his ledger books. My hands shake slightly as I break the wax. Inside is a thick sheaf of bank records from 1998 and a 3-page letter written in Arthur's neat, blocky handwriting. I scan the letter. "Clara, my love," the letter begins. "If you are reading this, it means I have failed to protect you from the shadow of my own weakness. It means Julian has discovered the trust drafts, and that his ambition has finally turned into the monster I feared it would become." I turn to the bank records. They are not receipts for Grace's support. They are forensic audit reports of the hardware store from the year Julian graduated from college. According to the audits, Julian's first business venture, the logistics firm he claimed to have built with hard work and a small bank loan, was funded by a systematic 2-year embezzlement of $85,000 from his father's store. Julian had forged Arthur's signature on commercial supplier checks, leaving the store on the brink of bankruptcy. Arthur had discovered the theft, but instead of calling the police, he had taken out a personal mortgage on the store's inventory to cover the loss, shielding Julian from criminal prosecution. But Arthur had kept the proof. He had kept every forged check, every altered invoice, and the forensic auditor's certified report. At the bottom of the audit is a signed confession from Julian, dated October 12, 1998, which Arthur had forced him to sign in exchange for not filing police charges. Julian's entire career, his reputation, his success, it was all built on a theft Arthur had quietly buried to save his son's future. And the statute of limitations on the forgery had never run out because Arthur had structured the debt as a private active lien against Julian's personal share of the family trust. "He knew," Leo whispers, his eyes wide as he looks at the confession. "Dad knew what Julian was the whole time." "Yes," I say, my voice turning cold as ice. "He knew." The active lien is a masterpiece of quiet legal containment. Arthur had not just saved Julian's reputation in 1998. He had bound him to a financial leash. The compound interest on the $85,000, structured at a standard 6% commercial rate over 24 years, now exceeds $320,000. Under the terms of the trust's private debt clause, this outstanding liability is directly offset against Julian's share of the family estate. Julian has no inheritance. He has no equity in this house. In the eyes of the law, he is not a beneficiary. He is a debtor whose outstanding liability to the Bennett family trust exceeds the value of any transfer he could ever claim. Leo stares at the signed confession, his fingers tracing his father's blocky signature on the yellowed paper. "All those years," Leo whispers, his voice cracked with a sudden, devastating clarity. At Thanksgiving, at Christmas, Julian would sit in that chair and talk about his portfolio and his investments. He made me feel like a failure because I drove a 10-year-old truck and worked 60 hours a week in my shop. He looked down on you, Mom. He treated you like an unpaid housekeeper. And his entire life was paid for by a theft he committed against the man who protected him. Desperate men build very high towers, Leo, I say gently, reaching across the table to touch his arm. But they forget that the higher the tower, the thinner the air becomes. Julian has been suffocating for 30 years, trying to keep his tower from falling. The golden child's success is often just a monument built on the invisible ruins of their parents' sacrifices. And when the light finally hits the foundation, the gold turns back into clay. Julian believed he was the master of this family. He did not realize he was merely a tenant, living on a grace he had spent his life abusing. We eat our dinner in the quiet, warm dining room. The roast chicken is tender, and the tea is sweet. For the first time in 10 years, there is no tension at this table. We talk about Grace's students, about the books she teaches, and about Leo's woodworking shop. He tells her about a white oak desk he is building, and Grace listens with Arthur's quiet, serious attention. There is a slow, beautiful healing in the room, a quiet reweaving of a family that had been torn apart by greed and silence. Grace stays the night in the guest room, which was Julian's old bedroom. There is a quiet poetry in that. The room that once housed the son who tried to destroy us now houses the daughter who helped save us. On Wednesday morning, the sun rises, thin and bright, casting long golden shadows across the wet garden. Grace leaves at 8, promising to return for Thanksgiving. When I hug her at her car, she smells of lavender and cold rain, and holding her feels like holding a piece of Arthur that had finally found its way home. At noon, Leo leaves for his shop, promising to return for dinner. I do not go to my weekly bridge club at the senior center today. I stay in my kitchen. I wash the breakfast dishes, dry them, and place them in the cabinet. I polish the mahogany table until the wood shines like dark water. At exactly 1 o'clock, the time my bridge club begins, the heavy crunch of tires on gravel breaks the quiet of the afternoon. I walk to the front window. A heavy white commercial moving truck with statewide estate liquidation painted on the side pulls to a stop near the back porch. 2 burly men in canvas jumpsuits get out, carrying heavy moving blankets, a hand truck, and a plastic clipboard. I walk to the front door, open it, and step onto the porch. Mrs. Bennett, the lead mover, a man with a thick beard and a badge that says Marcus, asks as he walks up the steps, "We're here for the pickup. Julian Bennett contracted us 3 weeks ago." I reach into my pocket and pull out a copy of the court-ordered trust freeze David Henderson had filed on Monday. "I'm sorry, Marcus, but there has been a mistake. The owner of the assets, Julian Bennett, is currently in custody, and this house is trust property. No items may be removed." Marcus looks at the paper, then at his clipboard. He frowns, rubbing his neck. "Ma'am, I think there's a misunderstanding," Marcus says, his voice turning uncomfortable. "This isn't an estate sale listing. We aren't here to tag furniture for a yard sale." "Then what are you here for?" "Julian Bennett didn't hire us to sell," Marcus says, sliding a document from beneath his clipboard and handing it to me. He signs a bill of sale and asset transfer agreement 3 weeks ago. He sold the entire contents of this house. The furniture, the art, the silver, the appliances, even your personal clothing to a private liquidator in Chicago for $70,000 cash. The dealer has already wired the money, and we have a signed court-ordered writ of replevin that allows us to seize the property immediately. We're clearing the house today, Mrs. Bennett. The contract says we have legal authority to enter by force if necessary. The writ of replevin is a cold, clinical piece of paper. It bears the blue seal of the county court, dated 21 days ago, authorizing the immediate seizure and removal of all personal property, chattels, and effects from 1442 Birch Lane. Julian had not just sold the land under my feet. He had sold the very chair I sat in, the bed I slept in, and the cup I drank from. He had hollowed out my house in his mind weeks ago, turning my mother's silver, Arthur's desk, and my memories into a $70,000 transaction to buy himself 24 more hours of credit. Marcus, I say, my voice carrying that quiet, unshakable weight that makes the burly mover freeze. The contents of this house do not belong to Julian Bennett. They are trust property, registered under the Bennett Family Trust. Julian has no more legal right to sell this furniture than he has to sell the county courthouse. Ma'am, I understand, Marcus says, his voice turning uncomfortable as he shifts his weight from one heavy boot to the other. But we have a signed court order here. If we don't execute the writ, we're in breach of our state contract. The liquidator in Chicago has a security interest. A security interest in stolen property is void, Marcus, I say. I walk into the kitchen. My mobile phone is still sitting in the tin of flour, so I lift the receiver of the old wall-mounted telephone and dial David Henderson's office. He answers on the first ring. Henderson. David, I say, my voice steady, though my heart is beating a slow, heavy rhythm in my chest. The liquidators are here. Julian signed a bill of sale and a writ of replevin with the dealer in Chicago 3 weeks ago for $70,000. They are here to clear the house. He did what? David gasps, and I hear the rustle of papers on his desk as he sits up quickly. Clara, do not let them touch anything. Under state probate law, a writ of replevin cannot be executed against trust-owned property for the personal debts of a beneficiary who is not the sole trustee. The bill of sale is a nullity. It is conversion of stolen property. I am calling Deputy Miller at the sheriff's office right now. He is still processing Julian's booking. This is grand larceny. Thank you, David, I say. I walk back to the porch. I hand the phone receiver to Marcus. My attorney would like to speak to your dispatcher, Marcus. And the sheriff's department is already on their way. Marcus takes the receiver, his face turning a deep, embarrassed red. He listens for a moment, nodding, his eyes darting to his partner, who is waiting by the truck with a stack of moving blankets. Yes, sir, Marcus says into the phone. I understand. Trust property. Yes, sir. We'll stand down. He hangs up the receiver and hands it back to me. The dispatcher just called it off, Mrs. Bennett, Marcus says, letting out a long, relieved breath. The sheriff's department put a temporary administrative hold on the writ, pending the fraud investigation. I'm sorry about the trouble. We were just doing what the clipboard told us to do. I know, Marcus, I say gently. It is not your fault. Thank you for your patience. A house is not just a collection of wood and fabric. It is a physical container of our lives. And when someone tries to strip it, They are trying to turn you into a ghost before you have even died. Julian wanted me to be a ghost. He wanted to return to an empty shell of a house, knowing that without my things, I would have no choice but to let him put me in the concrete condo near the highway. The two movers begin to fold their heavy blankets and place them back into the truck. The heavy diesel engine of the moving van idles, sending a plume of pale gray exhaust into the cold November air. Marcus walks back up the porch steps, his hard hat in his hand. He looks at me, his eyes filled with deep sympathy. "Mrs. Bennett," he says, his voice dropping into a low, confidential murmur. "There's something else you need to know. My dispatcher," she said, the liquidator in Chicago, Apex Assets, had a second work order scheduled for today. I freeze. The cold air suddenly feels very sharp in my throat. A second order. Julian didn't just sell the house contents, Marcus says, his eyes darting to the moving truck, then back to me. According to the contract, he listed Leo's custom woodworking and cabinetry as an auxiliary asset of his logistics firm. He claimed the shop inventory and the machinery were corporate property. The second liquidation crew was dispatched to your other son's shop in town at noon today. They're seizing his industrial saws and his inventory right now, Mrs. Bennett. By the time the sheriff's hold gets processed through the county computer, they'll already have his shop cleared out. The phone in Leo's shop rings and rings, the hollow sound echoing through the line until it cuts to a generic voicemail greeting. He is not answering. He is likely in the yard, his hands covered in sawdust, trying to defend the machines that represent his entire life. I do not hesitate. I walk to the pantry, reach into the flour tin, and pull out my mobile phone. The white flour dust clings to the screen, but I wipe it clean with my apron. I dial David Henderson's number again as I walk toward the front door. "David," I say, my voice sharp and cold. "The second crew is at Leo's shop right now." Julian listed Leo's business as an asset of his logistics firm. "That's corporate fraud," David says, his voice rising in anger. Leo is a sole proprietor. He's never had any legal or financial connection to Julian's corporation. "Clara, I'm calling Deputy Miller immediately." He's still at the station with Julian. "I'll meet you at the shop." I hang up, grab my gray wool coat from the hallway peg, and walk out into the cold rain. My old sedan starts with a heavy, wet cough, the windshield wipers squeaking against the glass as I back out of the driveway. I drive the 3 miles to the industrial park on the edge of town, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ache. A man's tools are not just metal and grease. They are the physical expression of his dignity. And when you attempt to strip them, you are trying to erase his worth in the world. Leo had built his shop from nothing. He had spent 10 years working 60-hour weeks, his fingers scarred from the blades, his lungs breathing in the pine dust, just to have a space that was entirely his own. Julian had tried to turn his brother's dignity into collateral for his own ruin. When I pull into the gravel lot of the industrial park, my heart drops. A heavy flatbed trailer is backed up to the wide double doors of Leo's bay. 2 men in greasy overalls are already wrapping heavy iron chains around Leo's $3,000 Delta cabinet saw, preparing to winch it onto the ramp. Leo is standing in the doorway. His face is pale, slick with rain, and tears of sheer, desperate rage. He is holding a heavy iron pry bar, his knuckles white as he stands between the movers and his remaining machinery. "You touch that planer," Leo screams, his voice cracked and raw, "and I swear to God I'll break your hands. This is my shop." Julian has no part of this. The lead mover, a thick-set man named Roy carrying a clipboard, steps back, his hand resting near his pocket. "Look, buddy, we don't want any violence, but we have a default corporate seizure order from Apex Assets." The corporate registry lists Leo's Custom Woodworking as a wholly owned subsidiary of Bennett Logistics. Julian Bennett signed the asset transfer deed 3 months ago. We have the legal right to seize the collateral. Julian lied, Leo gasps, his chest heaving under his flannel shirt. He doesn't own this. He's never bought a single nail for this place. I park my sedan directly behind the flatbed trailer, blocking their escape route. I get out of the car, the cold rain instantly soaking through my gray coat. But I do not feel it. I walk straight into the yard, my boots crunching on the gravel. "Stop," I say. Roy turns, his brow furrowing as he looks at me. "Lady, move your car. We're on a court-ordered repossession. We don't have time for family drama." "I am Clara Bennett," I say, standing next to Leo. I place my hand on his iron pry bar, gently pushing it down until the metal tip rests on the gravel. "And this machinery was purchased with a commercial loan co-signed by me, using funds from the Bennett Family Trust. The title deeds for these planers and saws are registered in my name and Leo's name. Julian Bennett has never held any title to this equipment." Roy sneers, tapping his clipboard. "That's not what the corporate safe in Julian's office said, lady. He had the physical title certificates for these 3 industrial planers in his ledger. He signed them over as corporate collateral. If they are yours, why did he have the titles?" I look at the heavy planers inside the shop. The realization is a cold, physical blow. Julian had not just forged my signature. He had gone into the house safe months ago, the one in the library, and stolen the physical equipment titles I had kept there since Leo opened the shop. He had stolen his brother's titles to secure his own loans. "Because he is a thief, Roy," I say softly, "and he is currently in county jail for forgery." "That's a civil matter," Roy says, gesturing to his men. "Until a judge tells me otherwise, the signature on the collateral transfer is valid." Winch the cabinet saw onto the flatbed. The winches begin to clank, the heavy iron chain tightening around Leo's table saw, the metal scraping loud against the concrete floor. Leo lets out a low, strangled sob, his shoulders shaking as he watches his livelihood being dragged toward the ramp. But then the high, rhythmic wail of a siren cuts through the rain. 2 county sheriff cruisers roar into the gravel lot, their blue and red lights flashing brilliant against the gray metal of the industrial bays. They skid to a stop, blocking the entrance to the yard. The driver's side door of the lead cruiser opens, and Deputy Miller steps out, his yellow slicker shining in the rain. But he is not alone. He walks to the rear door of the cruiser and opens it. Julian steps out. He is still wearing his charcoal suit, but he is handcuffed, his head bowed against the rain, his face pale and completely broken. Deputy Miller walks toward the flatbed trailer, his hand resting on his holster. He looks at Roy, then at the chains wrapped around Leo's table saw. "Step away from the winch," Deputy Miller says, his voice carrying the absolute crushing authority of the state. The corporate registry for Bennett Logistics was dissolved by the state court 20 minutes ago under an emergency fraud injunction. We have an active warrant for the immediate seizure of all assets transferred under the name of Julian Bennett. Roy, if you move that saw another inch, you are executing a fraudulent lien, and I will arrest you and your crew for grand larceny right now. Roy's crew doesn't wait for another warning. They unclip the heavy iron chains from Leo's Delta table saw, the metal links clattering loud against the concrete floor. They pull the ramp back into the flatbed, climb into the cab of their truck, and drive out of the gravel lot without looking back, their heavy tires kicking up a spray of gray gravel. The quiet of the rain returns to the industrial yard, broken only by the steady, rhythmic pulsing of the cruiser's blue lights. Julian stands in the mud, his charcoal suit soaked through, the fabric clinging to his shoulders. The silver handcuffs of his wrists are bright in the gray light. He looks small. He looks like the boy who used to hide behind the pantry door when his father's voice got too loud, waiting for me to come and tell him the storm had passed. But I do not step between him and the storm today. Julian, I say, my voice carrying the quiet, hollow weight of a mother who has finally run out of forgiveness. You should get into the car. The rain is very cold. Julian lets out a short, wet laugh, a dry, rattling sound that makes his shoulders shake. He looks at me, his gray eyes filled with a sudden, desperate venom that has nothing to do with the law or the corporate fraud. You think you're the savior, don't you, Clara? He says, his voice dripping with a bitter, defensive poison. He turns his head slowly, looking at Leo, who is standing in the doorway of the shop, his face pale and wet. Leo, tell her. Tell her how I got the keys to the library safe 3 months ago. I freeze. The rain feels like tiny needles of ice against my face. I slowly turn my head to look at Leo. My youngest son does not look at me. He stands in the doorway of his shop, his eyes fixed on the gravel at his feet, his fists clenching and unclenching. The color has drained completely from his face, leaving him looking almost translucent under the bare yellow bulb of the bay. Leo, I say. My voice is barely a whisper, but it is the loudest sound in the yard. Tell her, Leo! Julian sneers, taking a half-step forward before Deputy Miller's hand grips his shoulder, pulling him back. Tell her about the $20,000 you needed for your lumber supplier in August. Tell her how you were going to lose this shop because you couldn't pay for the white oak. You came to my office, Leo. You wept on my leather couch. You begged me to save you. Shut up, Julian. Leo chokes out, his voice thick with tears, his shoulders hunched as if he is trying to protect himself from a physical blow. I didn't steal those equipment titles from the library desk, Clara, Julian says, his eyes locking onto mine with a sick, triumphant light. Leo was the one who unlocked the drawer. He was the one who handed them to me. He knew I was going to use them as collateral for the business loans. He didn't care about the trust rules. He didn't care about your safety. He just wanted his $20,000 so he could buy that new Delta saw and keep his shop running. He sold you out 3 months before I ever listed the house. We build our altars to the children we think are innocent. failing to realize that under the weight of survival, everyone learns the language of betrayal. I look at Leo. I remember him as a baby, how he would only sleep if he could hear the sound of my breathing. I remember how I had spent 36 years protecting him from Julian's shadow, believing him to be the gentle one, the honest one, the son who loved this house and this family, for nothing more than the warmth of it. He had unlocked the drawer. He had handed Julian the titles. "Mom," Leo whispers, finally looking up. The tears are streaming down his cheeks, mixing with the rain. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was desperate. The supplier was going to sue me. I was going to lose everything. Julian told me it was just a formality. He said he'd release the titles in 3 months. I didn't know he was going to forge your name on the second mortgage. I didn't know he was going to sell the house. But you knew he was violating the trust, Leo," I say. My voice is entirely flat, stripped of all emotion, of all warmth, of all grief. It is the voice of a woman who has finally realized she is entirely alone in her own home. You knew the safe was private. You knew your father's rules. "I was going to pay it back," Leo sobs, his hand shaking as he reaches toward me. "I swear, Mom, I was just trying to save the shop." "Everyone was trying to save something, Leo," I say softly. "Julian was trying to save his logistics firm. You were trying to save your saws. And I was the only one trying to save you." Deputy Miller looks at me, his face filled with a quiet professional pity. He knows this town. He knows this family. He has seen the ugly ways greed can tear a household apart, but he has never seen a mother realize she has been sold by both of her sons on the same afternoon. "Mrs. Bennett," Deputy Miller says gently, "we need to get Mr. Bennett back to the station. David Henderson is waiting there to file the formal charges. Do you need a ride?" "No, thank you, Deputy," I say. "I have my car." Miller nods, guides Julian into the back seat of the cruiser, and closes the door. The heavy click of the lock is loud in the rain. The cruiser backs out of the yard, the blue and red lights disappearing into the gray mist of the afternoon, leaving the gravel lot silent once more. I stand in the rain. Leo is weeping in the doorway of his shop, his head pressed against the wooden door frame, his shoulders shaking. He looks like a child who has just realized the house he was hiding in has no roof. I do not walk to him. I do not place my hand on his head. I do not tell him the storm will pass. I turn around, walk to my old sedan, and get inside. The drive back to Birch Lane is the quietest 3 miles of my life. The windshield wipers swipe back and forth, a steady hypnotic rhythm against the glass. Shuck, shuck, shuck. The rain has settled into a cold, needle-thin drizzle that blurs the autumn trees into gray, smudged shadows along the road. I look at my hands on the steering wheel. They are the hands of a woman who has spent 42 years washing, cooking, sweeping, weeding, and holding. They are patterned with the pale, fine lines of a life lived in service to others. But today they do not shake. They are perfectly steady. When I pull into the gravel driveway, the house is waiting for me in the dusk. It looks smaller than it did this morning. The yellow light from the kitchen window, which I had left on to welcome my sons, looks thin and cold against the gray cedar siding. I walk through the front door. The scent of the roasted chicken still hangs in the hallway, warm, rich, and deeply familiar. It is the smell of a home. But when I walk into the dining room, The 4 blue willow plates are still sitting on the polished mahogany table, cold and untouched. I do not sit down. I do not cry. I walk to the kitchen pantry, reach into the flour tin, and pull out my mobile phone. I dial David Henderson's office number. David, I say, my voice carrying the quiet, absolute clarity of a winter morning. I need you to prepare the dissolution papers for the Bennett Family Trust. David is quiet for a long moment. I can hear the soft rustle of his papers over the line. Clara, if we dissolve the trust now, the property will have to be liquidated. The house will have to be sold to satisfy the outstanding debts Julian structured against it. I know, I say, but we will not sell it to Victor Sterling. We will sell it to the County Historical Preservation Society. They've wanted the land for the Wetlands Reserve for 10 years. It will not be paved. The trees will remain. And the surplus? David asks softly. After the debts are cleared, there will be about $200,000 left. What do you want to do with Julian and Leo's shares? Julian has no share, I say, my voice steady. His 1998 debt to the trust, with interest, completely absorbs his portion. The law will take care of Julian. I will not pay his bail. I will not hire his defense attorney. He must stand in the wind he created. And Leo? I look out the window at the garden, where the scarred paper birch tree stands wet and wounded in the dark. Leo's share will be held in a private educational trust for his children, I say. I will not use the trust funds to pay his $20,000 lumber debt. His machinery will be liquidated by his creditors. He must learn what it means to build a shop on his own foundation without stealing his mother's keys to do it.
Clara.
David hesitates, his voice filled with a deep aching respect. You will have nothing left but your pension. Where will you go? I am going to Indianapolis, David, I say, a small warm light finally breaking through the coldness in my chest. Grace has a small guest room. She says it smells of lavender. I hang up the receiver. I walk to the dining room. One by one I gather the 4 blue willow plates. I do not place them in the sink. I pack them into my mother's old cedar chest in the library, wrapping each one in the hand-quilted blankets I had made for my boys when they were young. I lock the chest with the brass key and place the key in my handbag. I pack 1 suitcase. I do not take the heavy furniture. I do not take the brass lamps or the solid oak dining table. I leave them for the Preservation Society to catalog. At 7 o'clock, the silver sedan with Indiana license plates pulls back into the driveway. Grace gets out of the car. She does not knock. She walks into the kitchen, her gray eyes taking in the single suitcase sitting by the door, the darkened stove, and the quiet, clean rooms. She looks at me, and she does not ask any questions. She simply reaches out and takes my suitcase. Are you ready, Clara? She asks softly. I am ready, Grace, I say. We walk out of the house together. I do not look back at the windows. I do not look at the empty chairs. As Grace backs the car out of the gravel driveway, I look through the window at the paper birch tree. The rain is falling harder now, washing the clear, sticky sap from its raw white wound. It is leaning slightly in the rising wind, its branches bare and dark against the autumn sky. It will fall this winter. I know it will. But the ground beneath it is deep, quiet, and finally clean. Children rarely notice a mother disappearing until the things they need disappear with her. Leo will return to Birch Lane tomorrow to find the locks changed and the sheriff's notice on the door. Julian will sit in his cell, waiting for a phone call that will never come. They will finally realize that the invisible foundation holding their lives together was not the house, or the trust, or the family name. It was the woman washing their dishes in the quiet corner of the kitchen. But by the time the first snow falls, the kitchen will be entirely cold, and I will be 30 miles down the highway, watching the headlights sweep across the dark open country, moving toward a home where my name is spoken only with love.